Hey there everyone, my name is AJ and I make videos about Dungeons & Dragons lore, including magic items, world settings, monster ecologies and much more. I usually upload 2 new videos per week with a live stream each weekend. If you like what I do, consider membership, Subscribestar or Patreon for written scripts and exclusive content, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the new episodes you can enjoy on your daily commutes, while working, or as you enjoy your hobbies in the comfort of your own home. In this video, I'm not talking about Dungeons & Dragons, I'm going to share my love of another game system, one I have been playing for almost as long as D&D, the Palladium role-playing games. One of the first examples of a megaversal game system, with a set of core mechanics that can apply to any genre of fantasy storytelling, any world setting you want to create, and a comprehensive series of books, source books that can be mixed and matched to run some amazing games. Palladium Books is owned and run by Kevin Siembeder. While his hands-on approach has ensured a cohesive and considered body of products over many years, it has also been somewhat of a creative bottleneck that can delay product releases and adaptation to new market opportunities. He is fiercely protective of his intellectual property, some would say to a fault, but his work has been undeniably innovative, very popular, and his company has endured over the many years when so many others have come and gone. Palladium Books is still actively producing new titles and has a legion of very loyal fans. Despite a few critical setbacks and blunders, such as the Robotech Tactics Kickstarter disaster, the company dusts itself off and gets back to work, navigating a very difficult marketplace. The first game released by Palladium Books was the Mechanoid Invasion in 1981, followed by the first editions of the Palladium Fantasy role-playing game in 1983, and the Supers title Heroes Unlimited in 1984, with the Valley of the Pharaohs releasing between the two as a box set that was a bit of a dismal failure but is a collectible item to this day. So, the company generally doesn't do box sets these days. Other popular titles include adaptations of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in 1985 and Robotech in 1986, following the popular comic franchises. Many people these days will instantly associate the company with the Rifts role-playing game released in August 1990 and published continuously by Palladium Books since then. Rifts takes place in a post-apocalyptic future deriving elements from cyberpunk, science fiction, fantasy, horror, westerns, mythology and many other genres. As with all of Palladium's regular print runs, Rifts books are also recognisable by their soft-cover perfect binding style, which has proven to be a great cost-cutting measure, with the book standing up to the sort of regular use and abuse RPG books are subjected to, while also not being the most expensive books on the market. The softcover format was an innovative development by Palladium, and to this day, Dungeons & Dragons titles are still being produced mainly as hardcovers, which I would argue are not really proven to be any more durable in the long run than any of Palladium's softcovers. I have a shelf full of examples to demonstrate this fact. Rifts serves as a crossover environment for a variety of other Palladium games with different universes connected through the rifts or dimensional gateways, tears in the fabric of reality on Earth that lead to different times, spaces and realities that Palladium calls the Rifts megaverse. Rifts describes itself as an advanced role-playing game and not an introduction for those new to the concept, which is mainly down to the relative complexity of the core game mechanics. Thankfully, as all the settings feature these same core mechanics, I only have to describe them once to you, and you will have a good idea of how all the Palladium settings are played. The exception is a core rules mechanic introduced in Robotech and later fully developed in Rifts setting books regarding to extreme levels of damage that are handled in combat, but we'll get to that in a minute. The core idea that a character created for any one game setting can be transported to any other Palladium game setting and be totally viable as a character has largely been a success for the company. Another generic game called Generic Universal Role-Playing System, or GURPS, created by Steve Jackson Games and first published in 1986, is also a universal game system that is still alive and well and being published today. So it was a popular idea back in the day that I think has more than proven itself as a viable innovation. Rifts takes this concept to the extreme, with the player character groups being incredibly diverse, but the setting itself has a core set of character classes that cover a wide variety of backgrounds and story elements. The fact that you can have a high-tech, drug-enhanced bounty hunter, a mutant humanoid dog soldier, a wizard and spandex-clad superhero in the adventuring party and not completely train wreck the game system is quite an accomplishment in the grand scope of things. Personally, I have my favourites in the Palladium lineup. Top of the list is Heroes Unlimited, the superhero setting. Well, it has some prefabricated world building elements in the sourcebooks for the main Heroes Unlimited rulebook, but it's basically set in a contemporary planet Earth with the addition of mutants, aliens, magic, and superheroes as you see fit. It pairs extremely well with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which has one of the earliest examples of a point-by character creation system which 100% rivals anything you will find now. It fits so well that the same mutant animal creation system is basically reprinted in a section in the Heroes Unlimited book. Another title that pairs perfectly well with it is Ninjas and Superspies, which has detailed options for cybernetics, super gadgets, martial arts training, and real-world hotspots. The equipment section has dated a bit, though if you are setting your games in the mid-1980s, it's right on the money. There is an older title from Palladium called Recon, set during the Vietnam War, which doesn't share the megaversal rule system. It's a pretty good game for players who have absolutely no problem having characters who are most likely going to die during the game session. Teenage Males, I'm looking right at you and your cavalier approach to creative uses of claymore, anti-personnel, explosive charges. That's to blame. One thing I can say about Palladium is they have some detailed catalogues of modern firearms, and in a superheroes game with characters who can almost shrug off bullets, we sure used a lot of heavy ordnance within major metropolitan areas, I assure you. If you know the game and what a vehicle stopper is, you know what I'm talking about. Also have some great anecdotes about the effect of dropping an AN M14 Hellfire incendiary hand grenade in a closed elevator with a supervillain. Oof! These games, set mainly in modern day with more conventional technology, are what I call the SDC titles, which Rifts, Phase World, and many more heavy sci-fi future tech supernatural books that came later, what I call the MDC titles. And to explain that, now is a good time to look at the basic rules of the game system. Game mechanics really hinge on the player character. If you can figure out a character sheet, you've figured out 90% of the role-playing rule set already. Palladium's no exception. Characters have 8 attributes. They are physical strength, physical prowess, physical endurance, physical beauty, speed, intelligence, mental affinity, and mental endurance. Like 5th edition D&D, most of the rules of the game are based on your character's ability scores, and in Palladium rules, the level of your character is actually a lot less important and doesn't impact very much on those attributes at all. Going up in experience reflects advancement in skills and special abilities. The skill system is quite complex and is based on percentile rolls. Combat is still handled predominantly with the 20-sided die. Damage is handled with a variety of dice, so you still need the full set of polyhedral dice to play. Combat is much more focused on realistic simulationist gameplay than it is in Dungeons & Dragons, which you either love or hate. Combat in Palladium can give players a hell of a lot more agency in telling the game master exactly what their character intends to do, and it's possible to make called shots to specific body parts, parry blows, make simultaneous attacks, use cover, and employ a full encyclopedia of kung fu moves. So combat in Palladium may play out slowly at the table, but the experience of it when playing is more like slow motion bullet time from a Matrix movie. The players can pull off some simply gnarly moves that everyone will be talking about later. A simple car chase can turn into an epic roller coaster of mayhem. Now, this is where the terms SDC and MDC come into it. Damage in the Palladium system is quite different from Dungeons & Dragons. Instead of a roll to strike simply hitting or missing, it is and it either doing damage to hit points or not. Palladium takes into account a lot more variables and is a bit more realistic about how damage works. Objects can take damage until they no longer function or are intact. This is called the structural damage capacity, or SDC. While living beings have their own SDC representing their stamina, protection, and ability to absorb non-lethal damage, but they also have their hit points, which represent their body taking serious damage, which they will require medical treatment for. Because no matter what level you are, nobody gets better at getting stabbed in the spleen. Armor class is also more realistic. Instead of just adding a bonus from armor worn, the armor has its own armor class and SDC that the attacker must bypass or blow through in order to damage the person wearing it. And the armor can get ruined from taking so much punishment in combat that it no longer offers any protection at all. You can shoot someone wearing a force field. There is little chance you will beat the force field's armor class, so it just soaks up damage until it can't take it anymore. then you take shots at the person. If you fail to beat the armor class of their suit of riot armor, the armor takes the damage, but if you roll over that, you take off the person's SDC, and if they have none of their SDC left, they are taking hit point damage, and now they are automatically losing extra hit points each round because they're actually at risk of bleeding to death unless they get medical care. So as you can see, it may be more complex, but so is reality. Characters can also try to parry hand-to-hand attacks. They can try to dodge gunfire. They can spray a whole room with bullets from a submachine gun. There are rules that cover all of it, and none of it is rocket science, even if you're dealing with rockets, which you are quite frequently. The timing of a combat round depends on how many attack actions each person has, and here is where the high level and advanced combat training really becomes important, because it is quite possible to face off against a trained martial artist who goes toe to toe trading attacks tit for tat at the start of the combat round, but then at the end of the combat round they still have a bunch more attacks that they can make, and all your character can hope to do is parry some of it, but otherwise they're going to get pummeled with a flurry of blows, which is exactly what you should expect facing off against someone who is way better at fighting. You get a few good shots in, and then they hand you your ass. The skills system for the Palladium games is also quite detailed. Sometimes your character will end up with a whole bunch of skill names and percentages which rarely come up in the game, but they serve the secondary purpose of filling in the background of the character. Characters select skills and skill package groups according to their education and training. The skills are either at a professional level, or there are what we call secondary skills, which are basically hobbies the character has some aptitude in. The character's method of education will provide a bonus to their skills and often provide access to restricted skill groups. So a person educated at a military academy is clearly going to have access to different skill sets than someone raised on the streets working at his uncle's car yard. Or a mutant animal trained to be a secret operative by a Black Ops science lab, or an alien explorer has only been on the planet for a few years since their spaceship crash landed. It's a little complex, but the one system can handle all of those options with relative ease. One standout feature that adds a lot of time and effort to initial character creation and the most work to character level advancement is the physical development via sport and martial art training is all cumulative and has to be added up and adjusted on the character sheet, and all the percentages for advancement for different skills are different for all the individual skills, which is a real pain in the ass. So I usually worked out all the bonuses for physical skills as an optional training package and just added the end result to my character sheets. And I just made my own homebrew house rule that all the skills went up by 5% per experience level. Just blank. It saved a lot of time. Universal rule systems are great, but they're also highly difficult to develop any further once you have a whole bunch of different source books and that use the same rule set. Palladium embodies that limitation in a textbook fashion, so still, I have to say, given the immense diversity of genres that their books cover, the system does work. And at the end of the day, to make a skill check, you're just trying to roll below your skill percentage. That's it, pass or fail. There are some abilities that directly relate to your attributes though. So for example, if you're attempting to get someone to trust your character, that bonus is determined by your mental affinity score, your character's ability to understand and influence other people, which Dungeons & Dragons just lumps into the charisma attribute, prompting many folks over the years to homebrew a house rule that splits charisma up into mental or physical attractiveness. Palladium sorted that out from the outset. The rules for combat with firearms also covers a lot of details and actually make modern weapon combat just as entertaining as going toe-to-toe with martial artists. The game's overall power level is capped enough that someone really good with using a longbow still has a pretty good chance of messing up some hero who can run at supersonic speed. This game can be deliciously crunchy in all the good ways, and it really encourages tactical, dynamic, mobile and complex gameplay from players who fully engage their characters with the environment and are keenly aware of things like just how effective a car door is at stopping handgun bullets as opposed to a hunting rifle or a vehicle-mounted machine gun. Long-time Palladium players can sound very much like they know a lot about guns. I'm no exception. I can talk about handguns, but I've never actually picked up a bullet-firing handgun in my life. Closest I've gotten to it was a gas-powered air pistol. In New Zealand, we use guns for hunting, so we use rifles. I'm still going to get to rifts and mega damage, super science and magic weapons, and the reason I think they are stupid as an idea just a few more minutes. Stick with me. Okay, let's take a look at the range of Palladium titles and go over what each of them is about. My personal bias is clearly built on which of the game titles I started out with and played for the longest period of time, so Rifts came much later for me. I'm from the pre-Rifts era, and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was where my Palladium journey began. I'm not sure if we read the comics or got the RPG book first, to be honest. TMNT was quite rare when the role-playing game came around. It was and still is a solid RPG system. The point-buy mutant animal mechanics are flawless. The martial arts was fairly basic, but it laid down the foundation for what would be massively expanded on later when Ninjas and Super Spies and Mystic China were released. TMNT was followed by a few dedicated supplements. After the Bomb was a post-apocalyptic setting that's a lot like a foreshadowing of what Rifts would be. Roadhogs expanded that as well, then adding a sort of a Mad Max feel to it. Then came the awesome Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Guide to the Universe, which is one of my all-time favourite source books. Then Mutants Down Under and Trucking Turtles, and after another mind-blowing source book called Transdimensional Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles that included rules for time travel, and finally Turtles Go to Hollywood. All in all, a great set of books. Oh, and one book of adventures in there as well. However, somewhere along there, my friends and I got our hands on Heroes Unlimited and Super Spies, and our options for gameplay just exploded. We spent countless hours making characters, custom gadgets, our own homebrew content, particularly cybernetics, psychic powers and super abilities. There were so many innovative features of that game system that we were barely touched on by other role-playing games at the time. The mental illness table and methods for handling characters with mental disorders is still pretty remarkable. Risky, I don't think they'll do it these days. We also picked up Beyond the Supernatural at some point, and that fit perfectly well into it all. The supernatural monsters in that book are excellent. The methods for handling psychic powers and magic were already fairly well developed in the system, and we just ran with it. Villains Unlimited, Gramercy Island, Sentry Station, and a bit later we had Aliens Unlimited, the Galaxy Guide, then Mutant Underground, and the 3 Powers Unlimited expansions, and finally Armageddon Unlimited. Oh, also Scrapers, but that came along as a Rift supplement mostly. Now, despite what people may think about the mechanics of the game system, the concepts included in Palladium's modern era role-playing settings are just as amazing and have informed how I handle things today in Dungeons and Dragons games, particularly in regard to cosmology and time travel in the game. So much of this stuff was way ahead of its time with Palladium. The philosophy at the heart of TMNT setting is and the way it handled timelines as parallel dimensions, the fact that you could create advanced human mutants, and despite the company continually freaking out about fans doing this, you could use the system to replicate just about any comic book or movie superhero or villain you wanted to. You still can. Planescape didn't come along for Dungeons and Dragons until 1994, while Palladium players were leaping through transdimensional and temporal portals as early as 1989. So it was well ahead of its time. Then came Rifts. The idea for it was already present in other RPG settings within the company's lineup. In fact, a friend of mine basically predicted the Rift setting in a letter he sent to Palladium Books with his idea for a source book. I've just read what the wiki page has to say about it, and I think I'll just repeat it because it sums it up really nicely. Rifts begins with 2 future historical premises. First, that humanity undergoes a golden age with tremendous advances in science, technology, military, and society. Humanity as a whole is at peace, for the most part, as the majority of Earth's nations decide to cease war and begin to share ideas and technology freely. Much of the solar system is conquered, or at least explored. Humanity's wars come to an end, and harmony reigns across the planet. Second, that this golden age is followed by an unknown cause near the winter solstice and a rare planetary alignment, causing a disaster that cascades into tremendous destruction via ripple effect in a way that nobody on Earth predicted. The cataclysm begins with unprecedented storms of all kinds, earthquakes and tsunamis, volcanic eruptions, including the Yellowstone National Caldera. What is already a huge release of mystical energy is multiplied as a result of several special conditions: a rare planetary alignment, occurrence during the winter solstice, and all at midnight, and deaths of millions at this time amplifies these already high psychic energies, triggering many powerful natural disasters across the world, including the return of the continent of Atlantis. The energy released from the deaths of millions more in turn releases even more mystic energy, causing more disasters in a vicious cycle. Ultimately, the total destruction brings an unprecedented energy release of billions of lives being lost, feeding the psychic power into the already supercharged ley line networks that crisscross the globe, causing rifts to open both on Earth and through the megaverse. Untold numbers of alien beings are pulled from their own homeworlds, while great powers of the megaverse are suddenly alerted to a new and valuable planet to conquer, a planet that is now a dimensional super gateway node. For hundreds of years after the Holocaust, many creatures, both mystical beasts and alien beings, come through the rifts. Some of them are now permanently opened to wreak additional havoc. The world is lost. It's now gone as we know it. A new dark age dawns, and humanity's shrinking population is reduced due to catastrophe and domestic failure, and it's just terrible. This period covering Palladium's Rifts Chaos Earth spin-off series is covered in the more recent books. Rifts, as a RPG setting, initially takes place in the year 101 PA, or post-apocalypse, in the equivalent to the year 2387. The post-apocalypse calendar was established by the formation of the Coalition States in 2286. Most of the Rift source books are centered around the 101 PA date, some before, some after. Anyway, by this time, most of the disasters have quieted down, though Earth is still bathed in the released potential psychic energy, or PPE, which fuels supernatural effects, and the ley lines are actually visible, huge walls of energy which travel around the planet. The planet's mystical energy has added untold numbers of alien beings from other dimensions who continue to arrive through the rifts both accidentally and deliberately. The humanoid creatures that arrive on Earth are referred to as dimensional beings, called DBs. Some are familiar fantasy races such as elves and dwarves, while others have never been seen before, created specifically for the setting, and there's great source books that cover these different races. Non-humanoid creatures have also arrived, including monstrous creatures and mystical demons who with hides as strong as tank armor, and more powerful, and the common theme in Palladium megaverse are the Lovecraftian alien intelligence, living mountains of flesh with lidless eyes, writhing tentacles, and great supernatural powers. In some rare instances, even the ancient gods of mythology have returned to claim their former lands. One such form of alien intelligences are the source of all ancient vampire myths, and it turns out they are quite real and end up dominating a big chunk of Mexico and South America. To cope with these natural, supernatural, and alien menaces, the human race has adapted in a variety of ways, many of them borrowed from technological developments of the lost Golden Age. Power armor suits and giant robot vehicles are frequently used to combat the dangers of the rifts, but more invasive augmentation is also common. Cybernetics. This has three basic categories: juicers, who do it chemically, the Borgs that do it mechanically, and the crazies who make use of performance-enhancing brain implants. All such augmentations boost strength, speed, endurance, and dexterity to superhuman levels. However, they all come at a great cost. Chemicals cause the body of the juicers to wear out faster, decreasing lifespan to a few years. Mechanical Borg augmentation causes a loss of humanity when those multiple limb and organ replacements become more machine than human. Brain implants can cause mental instability ranging from mild phobias to crippling neuroses or psychoses, making use of the mental disorder tables quite well. Dangerous augmentations are also necessary dangers for humans in order to keep the pace with the world around them, and those that choose augmentation accept those risks for the power they bring. Still others are required to receive augmentations either for self-defense, for their jobs, or even against their will, as the needy and weak are forced to and coerced to serve in the human centres of population. Some aren't aware of the dangers and accept the augmentation blind to the side effects. Others just go to it because they see no other way, or because tradition binds them. Some others turn to other means to become more than human. As magic abounds on Rift's Earth, many people turn to the magical arts. Others form pacts with alien intelligence or deities in exchange for great magical knowledge, risking becoming a pawn of the beings they dared to turn to for power. Still others discover that they have great natural psychic potential and dedicate their lives to discovering the abilities within their own minds. The ley lines, formerly invisible, now dominate the landscape, appearing as massive lines of bluish energy half a mile wide, some twice that tall, stretching thousands of miles, crisscrossing the globe. The largest can even be seen from space. Potent ley line walkers, wizards who can actually just sort of channel that power as they move along. Along with the rifts came a slew of world books that detail specific parts of the rift to Earth, such as the dimension books that cover alien worlds for the game to take place in as a setting or as a location player characters can travel to. One of the best world books covers Atlantis. I would also say Vampire Kingdom is one of the best sourced books. Triax and Northern Gun are also great, particularly if you love giant robots and cyborgs. Phase World and the various galaxy books expand into space and super science even further. Phase World is essentially a world like Rift to Earth, a super gateway, but tightly controlled by a dominant alien and ancient alien species called the Prometheans, and there's a lot of stuff in that book which I seriously enjoy. I've made so many Noro player characters, you guys. So many. Too many. My one critique of Rifts, and here's where we get to the mega damage thing, is that it just kind of went a bit crazy on the super damage thing. In a nutshell, 1 point of mega damage is supposed to be the equivalent of 100 points of ordinary damage, SDC damage. So essentially, the armor made to withstand mega damage is immune to lesser damage types, and if an ordinary person or object gets hit with mega damage, they just get exploded or vaporized or whatever. The designers state that while a baseball bat does damage, you can smack a tank with a baseball bat all day and it will not kill the tank. Fair enough, but in later books, they give even relatively minor puny supernatural creatures mega damage hit points and claw attacks, and it's just kind of silly. What I do, personally in my games, is I say that 1 mega damage is the same as 10 points of regular damage, and it's not immune to regular damage types, so it's just back to being really tough, not ridiculously tough, and it works fine, for me anyway. In theory, any character from Palladium's game settings can cross over into any other setting thanks to the megaversal game system. I've never played a lot of the Palladium Fantasy RPG. The modern edition of that made a lot of changes to better suit the megaversal rule system, but it's still perfectly fine as a fantasy RPG setting. I devoted a lot of my time to the Palladium RPG community on the megaversal message boards and made a few websites back in the day, some of which you can still find, but I'm not going to tell you where to go looking. I made a lot of unofficial new superpowers for Harrison Limited, and I eventually did some work officially published by Palladium Books in their in-house magazine called The Rifter. In issue 23, you can find my article on the Blade Mage, occupational character class for Rifts and Palladium Fantasy. I have not mentioned many of the other titles, such as Nightbane, Dead Rain, Splicers, Robotech, and the Mechanoids, in particular in detail. It's just because I've not played those settings much, if at all, so I don't have much personal experience to talk about. But as for the rest, I know this game system like the back of my hand, and it will always be one of my favourite RPG systems that I will happily play with anyone at the drop of the hat. Yes, it can be complicated to pick up for a beginner, but as I know the game so well, I can whip up characters for new players and have them playing with just the basics of the game in a very short time. All you really need is a GM who knows the rules well, and you can have a fun game. If you have any questions about Palladium games, throw them at me in the comments section. Though I will tell you right now that I did not pick up the latest Chaos Earth Rifts titles yet, so I don't know much about those books. I do know most about the other books though, including all of them that I mentioned in this video. Have at it. Please hit the like button if you made it this far. Subscribe if you like what I do. Check out my Subscribestar or Patreon links for the full scripts for these videos. Buy some Teespring merchandise. Wear your geek with pride. And as always, thanks for listening. I'll be back with more for you very soon.